Okay, good morning all, and welcome to those in attendance at the remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. Also to note that we may have members of public or press observing today's proceedings. Can I ask all of those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout? Can members of the local review body keep their cameras on but mute their microphone when not speaking? As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of these reviews. This meeting was originally convened in response to 4 requests for review of the decision taken by the appointed officer under the Council scheme of delegation, but the paper in relation to Scotstoun Moor has been withdrawn at this time and will be deferred to a meeting of a later date, and that will all be communicated to you soon. Members of the local review body have therefore copies of the review documents listed in the notice calling the meeting. I will now ask Ms McBain, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed in the conduct of these reviews and to take a quick roll call of members present.
Thank you, Chair. Members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. The first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. The regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. The focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. The circumstances in which additional matters can be taken into account are set out in the legislation and will be addressed by the LRB's advisors where relevant. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. If you can just please indicate that you're present for the recording. So, Councillor McRae.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Copeland.
Present.
Councillor Bolton for the first 2 reviews.
Present.
Councillor Blake.
Present.
And then we'll have Councillor Van Sweden coming on for the 3rd review in place of Councillor Bolton. Thank you.
No, present.
Thank you very much. Turning to consideration of the first case in respect of a decision to refuse the application for a Section 42 variation to conditions, removal of Condition 9 stair access of planning permission reference 231375 to remove the requirement to provide steps to Great Northern Road at 868 to 870 Great Northern Road, Aberdeen. Planning reference 250083. We will now hear from Planning Advisor in attendance, Ms Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal, as well as policies to be considered when determining the application. I point out that Ms Green's attendance today to all items is here to provide us the necessary planning guidance, because she's not been involved in the early consideration of any of the applications on today's review. Ms Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed developments, and in effect her role will be a neutral one, involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms Green, over to you.
Thank you. Morning, members. I'll just share my presentation. So this was a request for review against an application refused under delegated powers for the removal of the Condition 9, which required stair access to the site. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit. The applicant indicated on the notice of review that there are no new matters been raised within the submissions. And in terms of procedure, the applicant's content for the review to proceed without any further procedure. They do note that if members did wish for a site visit, it would need to be accompanied due to ongoing construction. So I'll provide some background to the cases before handing back for members to decide how to proceed. So that's the location plan site of the Porcelanosa, and this is the big Great Northern Road, Muggy Moss Road roundabout just here. access to the car park is taken in here at the side. And on the opposite side of Great Northern Road is a mix of residential and commercial buildings. To the north is the railway, and beyond that a car dealership, and to the west are commercial units including a Pizza Hut, a tanning shop, a charity shop and a wine shop. And the proposal is to remove the condition requiring steps from Great Northern Road into the site. And this is the overhead taken from Google. So the unit has been built just here, and the proposed steps would be around here. I've got a plan on one of the next slides. And there's quite a drop down from Great Northern Road, the pavement here, down into the site, which we'll see on some of the following slides. So this is a plan just showing the steps here, and it shows a 1 metre wide stair access. And that's prior to development on the site, just taken from Great Northern Road. And that's taken from down the side access road, looking back towards Great Northern Road up here. And you can see the slope within the site, although that's been graded into what looks like a steeper bank now. And the next photograph shows that, the bank down from Great Northern Road. So the steps would be coming down around this point. And permission was granted in January 2024 for the retail showroom. Development's complete and open, and it's subject to this condition that the development shall not be brought into use unless the stair access between the car park and Great Northern Road has been constructed and is available for use. And as noted within the submissions, the reason that was attached there was the wrong reason, and it should relate to providing, facilitating pedestrian movements to the site. So the reason for refusal related to sustainable transport mainly, and those policies that seek to encourage and facilitate developments that prioritise walking, wheeling, cycling and public transport for everyday travel. And development proposals will be supported where they provide direct, easy, segregated and safe links, with an emphasis on active and sustainable transport, and the internal layout of developments must prioritise those means of transport. So the reasons provided for seeking the removal of the conditions, such as security concerns, customers arriving by car and issues for those with restricted mobility, do not outweigh the benefits of providing the steps. Customers and staff may wish to walk. The provision of the steps would facilitate walking and avoid pedestrians from having to take a longer route and potentially climbing over a wall and down the slope as an alternative along what is an evident desire line. It would also future-proof the site in terms of access should another occupier that had a different demographic of customer take occupation. And the removal of the requirement to provide the steps would result in a development of lesser quality in terms of accessibility. And the applicant made the case, making several points, stating the site slopes down from Great Northern Road with approximately 2.5 metres between the road and the retail unit. That's, well, it's been built now. There's a granite wall of approximately 0.5 metre which is partially demolished. Pedestrian and vehicle access will be from a dead-end section of Muggy Moss Road, and that would lead to a car park at the front of the building which would be on the east side. with a landscape strip which separates the building from Great Northern Road. Steps would encourage out-of-hours access, which would be a security problem, states the applicant. They also state that data shows the customers will drive and the staff entrance is on the west side of the building, and there would be a path along the Muggy Moss Road access. They also state that the path along Muggy Moss access would be more level and steps would present a mobility issue. And finally, the slope supports Great Northern Road and the construction and design of steps would be a risk with costs for stabilisation. Some further points from the applicant. They state that the steps were a late addition to the project and are associated with additional costs. There've also been additional costs for surface water drainage, and the costs have risen significantly through the project and need to be cut for it to remain viable. The steps are superfluous and removal would reduce the overspend. The next point that's made is that determination of application should be in accordance with the development plan and that conditions should comply with Circular 4/1998 on the use of conditions, which hasn't been mentioned in the report of handling. And the circular contains the tests, which are that conditions should be necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development, enforceable, precise and reasonable. So in terms of necessary, the applicant states that the difference in walking distance with and without the steps and the steepness of the bank and wall lead to the conclusion that the route would not be a desire line. The route of the steps, that is. It's also stated that policy 13B1, requirement for direct a safe link, would be met by the footpath arrangements via the car park. It would still be significantly within the 400 metre zone for the bus stop, as well as 800 metres noted in NPF 4. And it's also pointed out the steps shown are only 1 metre wide and unsuitable for the less abled. Final points in terms of the test of conditions as being enforceable. With the stated reason, the applicant says that the condition would not be enforceable. In terms of it being precise, the applicant says that the condition is imprecise due to the incorrect reason. And in terms of whether it's reasonable, it's not reasonable as suitable alternative arrangements are provided. The steps would be insufficient width for pedestrians in opposing directions at the same time. And just also to mention consultations, the Bucksburn and New Hills Community Council, there was no response and there were no other consultations. So at that point I'll hand back to members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder, if you do not feel we have sufficient information to take that decision, we can request further written information to be provided, hearings to be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. At the moment, I feel that we have sufficient information to proceed, but I'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Copeland.
Proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Blake.
Yeah, I think we could proceed.
Thank you. And Councillor Bolton.
I think we've got sufficient information to make a decision today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, as members feel we have sufficient information, we'll now pass back to Ms Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for this review.
Thanks. So first of all, to mention, in terms of section 42, in determining the application, that would be in relation only to the question of the conditions subject to which the previous planning permission should be granted. And the options are to approve the permission subject to new or amended conditions, approve the planning permission unconditionally or to refuse the application, which would result in the condition on the original application remaining. So moving on to the development plan policies. The relevant policy in NPF 4 is on sustainable transport. Similarly, in the local development plan, policy T2 on sustainable transport and the planning guidance on transport and accessibility, and the circular on procedures for section 42 applications is also relevant. So looking at policy 13 on sustainable transport, obviously it aims for developments to prioritise walking, wheeling, cycling and public transport for everyday travel. And point B is relevant, where development proposals will be supported where it can be demonstrated that transport requirements generated have been considered in line with the sustainable travel and investment hierarchies, and where appropriate they provide direct, easy, segregated and safe links to local facilities via walking, etc. And similarly, T2 in the local development plan, new developments should demonstrate measures to minimise traffic and be accessible by a range of transport modes, including active and sustainable transport, with internal layouts prioritising walking and other active travel and public transport, with proposals being designed to allow for public transport penetration within 400 metres of the centre of development. So in terms of evaluation, the development plan has primacy, with all applications being determined in accordance with those policies. In terms of the conditions, we can retain the condition and refuse the application, amend or remove the condition. So the basis for the decision would be, would removal of the condition achieve the aims of the development plan policies in respect of sustainable travel? And would the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations weighing for or against? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, members? Councillor Bolton.
I was just wondering if we could go back to the picture that shows the access from the side, please.
Yeah, just a moment. Is it the plan?
Yeah, it's just so I can see about the segregated access where the car park is for pedestrians, etc. So I just want to see that that's actually been provided, or if it's been provided. So the actual entrance, it's slightly obscured because of the red line, but so you come round, and where's the pavement access to cross over to the building?
I guess you would cross here, or yeah, on here there wouldn't be a separate.
Okay. Can I just ask then, if we wanted improvements in terms of, it's just that you come in, if you cross where the cars are coming in, it's not particularly safe. It's just if there could have been a more appropriate crossing point created. It might be by moving up the parking spaces or something. Could we condition that, Lucy, if we remove the other condition? Just conscious. I mean, I know that if you're coming in a car, but you've got that car to protect you as you come in. It's just if you happen to be on a bike or you'll cycle around bike parking, which takes you probably in front of the building anyway. But it's more about people who are on foot. I just wanted to be able to be reassured that we'd have a suitable pathway for them to cross at.
I mean, I guess a condition could ask for a safe pedestrian route, details of it that we could then consider. I mean, it is already built, just to.
Yeah, well, but steps should have been too, but they're not. Okay, that's fine for now. Thank you, Lucy.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, convener. I guess my question is, so there were, obviously looking at the map, there's the pavement coming round. The steps down, so what sort of, it looked in that picture, it looked very steep. Is that, what, do we know what the gradient and the drop between the two? So is it, obviously it's much steeper now than in the other picture you showed. I'm just trying to envisage, if you remove that, whether people would jump the wall and come down, which you do see in other places.
It's stated that the drop's 2.5 meters. I'm not sure what the gradient is. It does look quite steep. Just let me go to that photo of the. Yeah, that's it. And there are proposals to put landscaping in there.
Okay, yes, I can. Okay, that's quite good to see that again. And how far was the bus stop? Because the bus stop's just along here, isn't it?
It was stated that it was within 400 metres, even with the additional walk.
Right.
Round.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Copeland. Councillor Copeland, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, convener. Sorry about that. Lucy, can you go back to the big picture with the showing the whole site, please? Yeah, that's fine. That's it. I think it's important to realise this is a dual carriageway. Traffic will be passing this from left to right as we look at it. The pedestrian crossing is actually to the right of this little opening. So anybody coming on foot from the town side or even this side will be using the pedestrian crossing, which is to the right of the building on this. So they'll be walking past the vehicle access to get to those steps. And there are no residential properties on that side of the street from the main junction right up. The nearest bus stop on that side of the street is up beside the junction with Manor Road. And then the other side of the street, if you like, the northbound side, it's approximately 100 yards along from this building on the other side. So pedestrians will be coming back past and using the pedestrian crossing facilities and coming back past the other access. That's correct, isn't it, Lucy?
I can pull up Google, if you like. Just stop sharing for a minute.
The,
Right. If I put the so that's a pedestrian crossing.
that's pedestrian crossing there, yeah. And I was going to say, following Councillor Bolton's point about access pedestrian route, anybody in a wheelchair is going to have to use this route anyway because they couldn't go down the stairs. So they have to walk past that to get to the stairs, whereas wheelchair access would be down that road to get into the car park. The other thing I noticed, I don't think that curve's been turned, is it? Or is it turned there?
That one looks as if it is, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So in effect, the wheelchair access is via road into the main car park as it stands. And the proposed stairs would be somewhere up about where that darker, but just where your pointer is now, would be the steps.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, members? Not seeing any hands at this time. Okay. So, in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Determination, members. I think from what I'm looking at the moment, where Councillor Copeland has pointed out in relation to the pedestrian crossing, if pedestrians were to come down North Anderson Drive into that area, they will be using that crossing and then entering the site down by that pathway into the. I'm not sure how much people would use that steps really coming from the other direction. Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, no, I agree, convener. I think actually the stairs would come up a bit hazardous, and I certainly can't see anybody trying to bump a bike down them either. And I'd rather see a condition put on the a safe pedestrian route with details provided, because I think that'd be far more meaningful for people with prams, push chairs, wheelchairs, and bikes to be able to access the car park safely. And that way we could forget the stairs and just make sure there's a proper access for all users at the one location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. One thing I don't agree with, however, in the applicant's notes is the regard to the security concerns over the site. I think if people are going to access the site, they're going to access the site regardless of where the entrance is. So that's one point that I don't actually agree with the applicant in relation to that additional stairs. That be it, I think we're going to be going down the potential route of there's no requirement for that stairs to be in there for other reasons, but the security point I don't agree with. Councillor Copeland?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we need the stairs, but it would be nice to have a delineated pedestrian access route through the car park.
Yeah. Anyone else wishing to enter into debate in this one?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I was going to say I agree. The only reason I could see for the stairs was for the bus stop, but because the bus stop's obviously slightly further the other way. But in reality, it's I think if there's a pavement round, then that it's minimal in comparison to the people who might use the pedestrian crossing.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Clark?
The only way a route would be going down the way if it was not steps and it was just like a ramp, a disabled ramp following, and that is not the case. This is stairs. So I'm afraid I didn't agree with stairs. If it had been a ramp, it would have been a totally different ball game because you'd have got your disabled in and wound their way around.
Yeah, good points well made, Councillor Clark. I think a ramp for that amount of drop there within that amount of space would be absolutely massive. But so yeah, I can see why the applicant isn't proposing anything along that lines there. But yeah, I don't think the stairs are really required at the moment. Therefore, members, are we happy to agree to overturn the officer's recommendations on this one?
Agreed.
Agreed.
With
thank
that
you.
condition that they provide the pedestrian stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
thank
Yeah.
you, Ms. Green. Just in relation to the condition to be put onto their further condition to put onto there regarding active travel plan, I guess, with relation to safe routes into the site.
Designated pedestrian route on the car park.
Yes. Yes, so you would be adding a condition and removing condition 9 on the steps. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So therefore, the local review body has agreed to approve the application, and with that additional condition placed on there as well. Please note that decision notes from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. Thank you very much, members. So turning to consideration of the second review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for detailed plan permission for the change of use from office class 4 business use to gym class 11 assembly and leisure at Innovation Centre, Exploration Drive, Aberdeen, planning reference number 250070. We'll now hear again from Planning Advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. Ms. Green, over to you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen again. Okay, so this is a request for review against an application refused under delegated powers for the change of use from office to gym at the Innovation Centre in Aberdeen Energy Park. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit. The applicant has indicated on the notice that there are no new matters been raised and that they would be content to proceed without further procedure. So I'll provide some background to the case before handing back for members to decide how to proceed. So this is the location within Aberdeen Energy Park in Bridge of Don. And this is the site here, just to the east of Claymore Drive, and it's accessed off Exploration Drive. To the south, there is an industrial premises of an oil services company. On the other side of Claymore Drive is the Silverburn site, which is being developed for houses by Cala, 69 houses there. And this is the energy park in this area. Down here is the former AECC site with the household waste and recycling centre being developed just up here, and then it's subject to applications for housing in here. This is the 3D image of the site, and it's this building in question for the application. That's just showing the frontage of the building off Exploration Drive. And the existing floor plans. So there would be 1,248 square metres of space, which is split up between 22 small offices at the moment. And there's existing landscaping and trees externally together with 68 parking spaces. And there wouldn't be any changes to the building, well, there's no changes within this application externally. So the reasons for refusal in the report of handling are the conflict with the policy, stating that the proposal would attract customers from a wider area than just from within the business zone. So the proposal is contrary to B2 policy. And there's no evidence that the use would be targeted at meeting the needs of businesses and employees within the business zone rather than the wider area. Second reason for refusal was the impact on existing centres, With the scale and nature of the proposal, it has the potential to attract significant footfall. And it stated that a town centre first assessment was not submitted to show why it couldn't have been located within an existing centre, and that it therefore conflicts with policies 27 on city, town, local and commercial centres, VC3 on network of centres, VC8 on town centres and VC9 on out-of-centre proposals. And final reason for refusal was sustainable travel. So due to the scale of the use, distance from bus stops and town centres, the large car park and limited pedestrian connectivity, it would be contrary to policies 1 on climate and nature crises, 13 on sustainable transport and T2 on sustainable transport. So the applicant's case over the next couple of slides is that there is a need to diversify traditional employment areas to support the needs of the workforce. NPF 4 encourages mixed use areas, and the Chief Planner has instructed that NPF 4 should be considered as a whole. There are residential developments in the area. There's Clover Hill to the north, Silverburn just to the west, and the former ACC. Overall 950 houses, all within or partially within the 800 metre zone, and the gym would provide health facilities. It's stated that the building's been vacant for more than half vacant for more than 4 years, and it's now 90% empty. The proposal would bring back into use a vacant building, and that would be in line with policy 9 in NPF 4. The gym use would encourage users to the other units within the business park, and it would be open 24 hours. The land to the west, including a nursery, a gymnastics centre and the site of 69 houses, those were under policy B2 in the previous local development plan. And further west is Denmore Industrial Estate with employment uses, and it also has 3 drive-throughs or fast food establishments and an indoor sports venue, all on B1 industrial land. I've got some plans of those from the applicant's statement on the next few slides. They also state that there are no general fitness gyms in the energy park, with the one to the west being specialist gymnastics, and the nearest are the council-run Alex Colley Centre and Jesmond. It's further stated there are no objections from environmental health, the roads team or the waste team, that the gym would meet the needs of employees in the energy park, Bridge of Don and the Denmore Industrial Estate, with hundreds of people within walking distance and no competition. And it's also stated that gyms are recognised as standard service in business parks. A few more points from the applicant. A town centre first assessment was included in the planning statement, and this has been expanded within the submissions. It states that there are no vacancies within Scottstown Neighbourhood Centre. In the Brayhead Way Centre there is 1 vacant unit, but it's too small, and the Jesmond Centre contains a gym already. It states that there are walking routes to the site with good footways and crossing and bus stops on Ellen Road. And in terms of walking distance, there is housing, church and employment areas, and this use will help complete the 20-minute neighbourhood. It's also stated that most large business parks have gyms, and examples are Alton's, Dice, Kingswells and West Hill. In terms of, just before I show you the other slides from the applicant's submission, in terms of consultations, there was no objections from the roads team. They asked for a cycle parking condition, and it was stated that there would be an increase in trips in the afternoon, but no impact on the road network. And it's confirmed that bus stops are within 15 minutes walk. The waste team had no objection, and environmental health had no objection, but requested a condition restricting the use to a gym. Bridge of Don Community Council had no response. So just before I hand back to members, I'll just show you the 2 images from the applicant's slide. And this is showing various, this is the application premises, and then it's showing you the various other uses referred to. So this is the site being developed for housing. So if they were to walk to the gym, they could go up here and around, or this way. That's the gymnastics centre that was referred to as the nursery. And then King's Church is down here. I've mentioned those two sites. Clover Hill access, there's no route through here, so people would need to walk down here and either round or up here and round. I think that must be the private car park that's being referred to, but there isn't a route through that I'm aware of. And then this was also referred to, the 400-metre zone and the 800-metre from the site just there. So I'll hand back to members now to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much. At the moment, I think we would be happy to proceed, but we'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Bolton.
Happy to proceed. We've got enough information. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blake.
Yes, happy to proceed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Copeland.
Carry on.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark.
Happy to proceed.
Thank you very much. Therefore, members feel we have sufficient information, so we'll pass back to Ms Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and procedures for the review.
Thanks. Right, I'll just move on to the policies that are relevant. So NPF4 policies. As we know, policies 1 and 2, all decisions should give significant weight to the climate and nature crises, with climate mitigation stating in policy 2, stating that development proposals should take into account mitigation for climate change adaptation. Policy 9 encourages the reuse of buildings as opposed to demolition, and I'll cover the sustainable transport policies on following slides. Policy 23 supports proposals with a positive effect on health, and policy 26 encourages business uses, and the others will come to on the following slides. So policy 13 on sustainable travel encourages developments that prioritise walking, active travel and public transport, with the policy outcome that developments are in locations which support sustainable travel. And in particular, section B, development proposals will be supported where it can be demonstrated that the transport requirements generated have been considered in line with sustainable travel hierarchies, and where appropriate provide direct, easy, segregated and safe links to local facilities via walking, wheeling and cycling, and are also accessible by public transport. Just looking at policy 15 on local living and 20-minute neighbourhoods, development proposals should contribute to local living, and to establish this, consideration should be given to settlement patterns and the level and quality of interconnectivity between the proposed development and the surrounding area, including sustainable modes of transport. And I've just highlighted high quality walking routes and access to sport and recreation facilities. So looking at policy 27, this relates to the town centre first approach, which states here that proposals for uses which will generate significant footfall will be supported in existing town centres and will not be supported out with those centres unless a town centre first assessment demonstrates that all centre and edge of centre options have been assessed and discounted, that the scale of development cannot reasonably be altered or reduced in scale to allow it to be accommodated in a centre, and the impacts on existing centres have been assessed and there'll be no adverse effect on the vitality and viability of the centres. So moving on to the local development plan policies, the site zoned within policy B2 as a business zone. Policies on sustainable transport and parking are relevant. The VC policies relate to the network of centres and town centres and out of centre proposals. Then there's waste management, healthy developments and noise. With the Aberdeen planning guidance notes that go with those. In terms of the employment land audit, it showed there's no shortage of employment land. So just looking at some of those policies in more detail, this is the zoning policy for the site. So it states that only Class 4 business uses will be permitted in order to maintain a high quality environment, and facilities that directly support business uses may be permitted where they enhance the attraction and sustainability of the business zone for investment, and such facilities should be aimed at meeting the needs of businesses and employees within the business zone rather than the wider area. On sustainable travel, this is similar to the policy in NPF 4. Where it states that new developments must be accessible by a range of transport modes. Internal layout of developments should prioritise walking, wheeling, cycling and public transport, and be designed to allow for public transport within 400 metres of the centre. And looking at the town centre policies, so this sets out the hierarchy of centres, stating that proposals for new development of this type should be located in accordance with this hierarchy, which starts with the regional centre at the top, neighbourhood centres at tier 4, commercial centres. And it states that proposals should address a sequential town centre first approach, followed by accessible edge of centre sites and then commercial centres, with exceptions only being made on sites allocated for these uses in the plan, or where it's demonstrated that activity and locality specific issues make this impracticable. And in all cases, proposals should not detract from the vitality or viability of a centre. And this policy VC9 is on out-of-centre proposals, where it states that all significant footfall generating development will be refused planning permission if it doesn't satisfy the following conditions. So those are: no other suitable site is available in a location that's acceptable in terms of the sequential approach. There would be no significant adverse effect on vitality or viability of existing centres. There's a qualitative or quantitative deficiency in provision of the kind of development that is proposed. It would be easily and safely accessible by active travel and public transport. No significant adverse effect on travel patterns and air pollution, and no adverse environmental concerns. So overall, the primacy of the development plan in making decisions, with all applications determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And for this particular application, would the proposals comply with zoning policy B2? Would the use be for employees of the businesses? And also, would it comply in particular with VC9 in terms of it being an out-of-centre proposal, or would it effectively adversely affect town centres, and also the issue of sustainable travel? So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations indicating otherwise? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, members? Not seeing anyone indicating at this time. Okay. Therefore, in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would again highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Determination, members? Councillor Bolton?
Sorry. You know, obviously, what we have a procedure to go through in terms of how we rank the suitability of these different offerings in different locations. But for me, I don't see what the problem is. We're reusing a building that's existing, so we're stopping it being demolished. We've seen a huge change in the mix of offering in that area with Clover Hill, with Silverburn, with the church into the exhibition centre. You know, I think we're creating a new neighbourhood there, which was badly needed given where we put that housing, you know, the Clover Hill stuff. So I actually think the only thing I would like to have seen is if we could have got some sort of connectivity perhaps between that site by foot for people being able to get in rather than having to go through the access in the car park. But, you know, I'm struggling to see the problem because it complements the gymnastics offer that's there. I appreciate that V9, there's a slight tension, but actually then that actually creates a tension with the 20-minute neighbourhoods because we're trying to create a 20-minute neighbourhood, and you could potentially be going to the gym before you pick your kids up from the nursery. You know, I actually think it's a really good site, and I'm happy with the environmental health suggestion that we put on, you know, restricting it to gym use. I think that building, yes, it's opposite an industrial site, but actually it probably lends itself then well because people will be listening to their music or exercise classes, so they're not going to worry what's happening across the road. Whereas if I'd been in some sort of residential, then that would be different. I think it's actually a good site and a good use. So I'm struggling to find a negative other than if we can maybe perhaps have a better, you know, if there could be a connectivity that they suggested that might be able to beside the nursery, I think it was there. So there'd be easier access from people coming maybe from Clover Hill and Silverburn, etc. So, yes, Silverburn. So I'll leave it at that, convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bolton. Yeah, I think I agree with that. We're creating essentially in terms of VC9 a new local centre with the amount of housing that's going in that area and with connections with other local businesses that's popping up and with the church itself. In terms of gyms in business parks, I've just got some quick notes here. We've got one in the middle of Rubislaw and one up in Wellington Circle as well. So it's not out with the norm for gyms to be within business parks, and with creating a gym in this area, it may start to stimulate a little bit of economic movement in that area. Businesses may then be further attracted to come back into this business park with the amenities that have been or will be provided with the local area with the addition of the gym. So I agree with yourself there, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Copeland.
Thanks, convener. You two have just stolen everything I was going to say. I would add to that, I agree with you totally. It might actually enhance the desirability of other units being occupied within the business park that has facilities. I mean, we are essentially creating a small town out there with 650 houses. And we don't want to replicate what happened in Glasgow in the 60s when they built things like Shettleston and that and put no facilities in. I think it's important that we put facilities in where there is housing, and makes these places far more attractive and probably attracts further investment. And I think we've got to look at the big picture here and go with it. It's Just as a matter of interest, you might be interested to know that where the nursery is, used to be a gym operated by Off Petroleum. That was their gym in the leisure centre. So basically it became a nursery. So we're basically going back to the future, if you like. But I'll leave it at that. I fully support this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Convener. I actually agree as well. I didn't see the conflict with the business zone. I think it was very much fitted in with the idea of being it supports the health and well-being of employees within the business park. And I think it will be more attractive. I did also think that it fitted very much with Policy 9, the brownfield sites, because you're reusing an existing building which has is not as occupied as it once was. I did think that it would be nice to see some sort of paths leading towards the new development in Cloverfield. I appreciate that's out with this particular one. So I think it would be good to see more facilitation of walking, but overall I thought that was the right I think it doesn't. I think it's fine. I didn't think it conflicted with the policy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blake. Yeah, the paths are unfortunately out with the development, so we wouldn't be able to sort of condition anything there. But we can double check with Miss Green when we bring her in at the end. Councillor Clark.
Well, I think I totally agree with you all here. I think it complements the area and the fact that we're going to have 650 houses there. I just agree with everything you say there. I don't see why we shouldn't agree to it. There's nothing jumping out to me saying to not agree with it. I think it'll attract people to the area. It'll attract them from the other sites as well as the residents living there. So it can only be a good thing.
Thank you very much. Therefore, I think we're all in agreement. So therefore, the local review body has agreed to overturn the decision of the appointing officer. We now need to consider whether any further conditions should be attached to the approval. Ms. Green, just in terms of conditions onto this one, do we have cycle parking provisions on the application? And also, I'd like to see some sort of commitment towards EV charging on site as well.
Yes, cycle parking was suggested by the roads team as a condition. And there was the environmental health suggestion that it should only be a gym and not other uses within the same use class, which I think include discotheques and concert halls.
Yes.
EV charging, I was just checking the planning guidance there in terms of whether it applies for changes of use. Yeah, it does. New non-domestic. It does appear to refer to new non-domestic buildings rather than changes of use. So it may be, it may not be reasonable to require it because it would require obviously digging up the car park, and the APG doesn't seem to apply to changes of use for non-domestic buildings.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Copeland. You're on mute, Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, when we're saying it can only be used as a gym, would that allow them to have a small cafe within the building, or would that preclude that as well?
That could be considered ancillary if it was a small cafe, just for gym users. If it became something above that, they'd need to come back for permission anyway, because it wouldn't be in the same use class.
Yeah, is there anything we can do basically so that would allow them to have? I know in some places they have what they call a juice bar or whatever within the building for people using the gym to get some refreshment. or just leave that out and see what they come up with.
I mean, they could provide a small ancillary cafe. It's just they haven't applied for a mixed use, so we wouldn't be able to add anything else in.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you much. Are members happy with those conditions?
Can I just ask about we were going
Yep.
to check about the path access. Is there anything, because they mentioned something in their feedback to us, Lucy?
I mean, it's all subject to private land in the ownership of others, so I can't see that we could condition that. It would be we can't.
Do you note?
Yes, we can put an advisory note on. Fiona, I think, is
Bring in Fiona with that one.
Hi. Yeah, I was just going to say, and Lucy, you can keep me right as well, but I think possibly if it's within somebody else's ownership, we could consider a grampian condition. So it'd be a suspensive condition that no works are to take place or no occupation is to happen until those works have been completed. I don't know how you think that would sort of fall within, the picture of this.
I think that would be unreasonable, personally.
I was going to say, I don't think it was more that if we even have it as an advisory note, given they've given a suggestion of it to work with other parties to try and achieve better pedestrian access into the site, something like that. And if we can't do it, but I just think given they've mentioned it, I think it would just be a by the way, it's a bit like all the other advisory notes. Just a gentle reminder that they mentioned it. And that wouldn't be any onerous, or it wouldn't be, it's not something we can enforce, but it's just something that we'd like them to consider as they're moving along.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything that indicates a third party that will be willing to, so it's just, I'd be a bit concerned about that, putting it as a condition, but I can put on an advisory.
Yeah, if we go down the advisory route, it means that it's not at conditions, it's not going to cause difficulties to the applicant. Happy, content with that, Councillor Bolton? Okay, perfect, thanks so much. Approved. So, turning to consideration of the third review in respect of a decision to refuse the application for the detailed... Oh, sorry, just before we begin, Councillor Bolton, I understand you're going to head away from this one, and we're going to bring in Councillor Van Sweden.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's in my ward, so I can't take part. Would have
No
quite
worries,
happily
thanks.
done so, though.
Thanks so much
Okay.
for attending today, Councillor Bolton.
Thank you. Bye now.
Cheerio.
Bye.
And welcome in Councillor Van Sweden. So, turning to consideration of the third review in respect of a decision to refuse the application for the detailed plan permission for the change of use to amenity land to domestic garden ground and erection of fence, which is partly retrospective at the Mount, which is the Bush, Aberdeen. Planning reference 240753. Again, we'll pass back to Planning Advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused.
Thank you, convener. So this is a request for review against an application refused under delegated powers again for change of use of amenity land to garden, and it's partially retrospective. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit. The applicant indicated that there are no new matters within the submissions and that they would be content for the review to proceed without further procedure. So I'll provide some background information and then hand back to members to decide how they wish to proceed. So this is the location plan. The red line and the blue line is other land owned by the applicant. And here is the site in Cooter. It's one of a pair of semi-detached houses, and it's this one on the right here. And the site size is 300 metres squared in total. just a closer up view of the house there, with the site including the surrounding woodland area. There are quite a few photographs in the agenda pack, and I've just pulled out a few from Google and a few from the pack. So this is from the site from outside the site just to the east, and other housing is just here on the right, and you can look through the trees and just see the application house there with its extension to the rear, and you can see a bit of the fence. So this is a more detailed site plan. The house is here with the existing garden in the yellow stripes, and then the proposal for change of use within this area of red, and the red dashed line is the fencing. And then beyond that is land also owned by the applicant and kept as woodland. And you can see I think the 11.5 metres along the boundary with the other house is referred to in the submissions, and that's the other pair of the semis just there with its rear garden. And there was a detail of the fencing there, timber fence. So this plan shows the extent of TPO in this speckled effect, and the site is outlined here in turquoise and grey. And the report also notes historic maps from 1866 which show the site wooded. There are a few photographs taken from the applicant's submissions, although there are many more in the pack. So this is from within the woodland looking towards the house. And again, slightly further east. So those are photographs too, there looking towards the house. And then some from within the garden. And this is, the fence has been moved back so that this area of ground the change of use relates to. And then some further photographs from the pack looking west along the back of the fence, and that's looking outside the site towards the rear of the houses to the northeast, and again looking east towards those houses, just to get an idea of the area. And also a photograph showing the former extent of garden, and this is with the this conservatory has now been replaced with an extension of similar size, so it's just showing that's the kind of pinch point where the garden was quite narrow, 2 meters width I think, and the yellow line is showing the approximate extent of the new boundary, and that's just taken from the review submissions. So the reasons for refusal were that the change of use to domestic garden ground and the erection of fencing would result in the enclosure and loss of an area of open space and mature woodland habitat of local biodiversity value, and that contributes to the character of the surrounding area. And the proposal would therefore conflict with Policy 6 on woodland, H1 on residential areas, and NE2 on green and blue infrastructure, which includes urban green space. And the siting of the fence and resultant irregular boundary layout is inconsistent with the established pattern of development, and it adversely affects the character of the area, conflicting with policies on design, quality homes and D1, which is design of the local development plan, as well as the householder development guide. Second reason was that the development does not place significant weight on global climate and nature crises and is contrary to Policy 1 and 2 on climate mitigation and Policy 3 on biodiversity. And thirdly is the precedent that would be set by it for. So the applicant's case over a couple of slides. The land in question is 15 metres wide, that's to the north and east boundary, and the change of use is sought for a smaller area than the area that's in the ownership of the applicant, which is only 12 metres wide to the north, and it's 1/3 of the area that's actually owned. So they're saying that the change of use only applies to 1/3 of the total area that they own. The site plan shows a restricted area of existing garden that's barely 2 metres between the rear boundary and the house at the closest point. And the extension, which is the same size as the previous conservatory, is very close to the existing boundary with little room to move around it. They explain confusion over the previous application for the extension, which originally they state showed the extended garden, and then a revised plan was requested from the case officer and approved, which is explained in order to state that the applicant acted in good faith when they erected the fence around the extended garden. They state that no protected trees have been removed, the only ones that have were storm damaged, and that the land is unmaintained and it's dense woodland, and the woodland would be unaffected by the proposal. The area for the change of use, to which the change of use applies, would provide a usable garden and privacy and amenity, and it wouldn't undermine the remaining land. And they also state that the area is zoned under residential policy, not open space policy, and also that the fence would be permitted development, and there's no conflict with policy D1 as a result. I've just put a note there, which is that it would only be permitted development as householder development, so dependent on the change of use. Further points, the land would continue to contribute to biodiversity with planting that would be carried out in the garden, and also to climate change mitigation and nature. The area is not amenity ground at the moment, and there's no conflict with the householder design guide, which states that it may be acceptable to include within garden ground secluded areas that are not visible from footpaths or roads, and that do not make a contribution to the wider visual amenity of the area. The applicant states that photographs show that the area is not visible. And it's also stated that the overarching principles of NPF 4 support a healthy lifestyle, and also no footpaths are affected. So finally, to confirm that there were no comments from the Community Council, and there are no objections from the roads team, and no response from the police. So at that point, I'll hand back for members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much. So we now need to consider we have sufficient information in front of us to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder, if you do not feel you have sufficient information to take a decision, we can request further written information to be provided, hearings to be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. We'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Blake.
I think we have sufficient information, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Sufficient information.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland.
Yes, proceed.
Thank you, Councillor Van Sweden.
Proceed, thank you.
Thank you very much. I also agree we have sufficient information to proceed, so therefore we'll pass back to Ms Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for this review.
Thanks. Right, I'll just move the slides on to policies. So these are the relevant policies from NPF 4. And as we know, policies 1, 2 and 3 are overarching and relevant to almost every application, requiring that decisions are made with significant weight being given to the climate crisis and mitigation. Policy 6 protects native woodland and seeks its enhancement. Policy 14 seeks that development provides for healthy lifestyles through access to nature and green space. And Policy 16, in terms of existing houses, refers to protecting residential amenity and the environmental quality of the home and the surrounding area in terms of size, design and materials. And in terms of local development plan policies, the site zoned within Policy H1 residential areas, which I'll come back to. Policy NE2 states that we will protect urban green space, which includes woods and small areas not included on the proposals map, and that development proposals that do not achieve this will not be supported. Policy NE5 seeks to protect trees, and D1 and policy, along with Policy 14 in NPF 4, seek development designed for healthy and active lifestyles through access to nature and green space. And Policy D2 on amenity states that all residents should have access to usable private or semi-private open spaces and sitting out areas. And finally, WB1 states that development is required to provide healthy environments, facilitate physical activity and promote physical and mental well-being. So this just shows the site just here within a residential area. And Policy H1, the zoning policy, states that within residential areas, proposals will be approved in principle where they do not constitute overdevelopment, they don't have an adverse impact on residential amenity and the character and appearance of an area, and they don't result in the loss of open space. So looking at that open space, it refers to the open space audit, and the Open Space Audit 2024 has just become available, although the report refers to 2010 audit. But this is on our system now. So the space is part of Johnston Gardens North. This is the site here. It has an overall score of 18, which is considered high. It also scores high for place, habitat and connectivity and biodiversity, although frequency of use was scored low. So, and it falls into natural, semi-natural green spaces. So this is quite a lot of text on here, but it refers to changes of use of amenity space from within the householder guide. So these are the various criteria. And this is the bit that's quoted by the applicant. Sometimes small incidental areas of ground make little contribution to the appearance of the neighbourhood. For instance, it may be acceptable to include within garden grounds secluded areas that are not visible from footpaths or roads and don't make a contribution to the wider visual amenity of the area. And further points, the proposal should not fragment or if replicated be likely to incrementally erode larger areas of public open space or landscaping. They shouldn't worsen or create a deficit in open space. which there isn't a deficit in this area. The proposal should not result in any loss of visual amenity, including incorporating landscaping features, mature trees, or trees that make a significant contribution. And finally, the proposal should not result in an irregular boundary layout that would be out of keeping with the otherwise uniform character of the area. And a number of those are referred to in the report of handling as well. So finally, evaluation would be on the basis of policies within the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So in terms of zoning, it's located within a residential area under policy H1. Would the proposal result in loss of a valued open space, and would it fragment space? In terms of the householder guide, is it a small incidental area that makes little contribution? And also the issue of impact on biodiversity and trees. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations weighing for or against it? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, members? I'm not seeing any hands at this time. Okay, therefore, in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations related to the case have been considered and taken into account. Determination, members. I think Councillor Copeland. You're on mute, Councillor Copeland.
This is, I'm maybe preempting you here, but I would be willing to grant this. It's enhancing quality placemaking for the print. It's not amenity ground. It's in the ownership of the applicant. It's not near any footpaths and it's not being overlooked. And there are no trees being removed. So the protected trees are still there. And I can see no conflict regarding open space and amenity. In fact, what this is doing is enhancing the quality of placemaking. So I'd be, there's an important differences with this and the last applicant. This is actually in the ownership of the applicant, not near a path. Nothing's being lost as such because there's no really public access. So I'd be quite happy to go with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll bring back in Ms. Green on that point.
Yeah, it was just to emphasise really that ownership isn't in itself a planning consideration. You just need to look at the nature of the area and its use. Yeah,
I'm aware of that, but I was pointing out the difference between the last application and this application, that there was no debate as to who actually owned it, whether it was a reasonable thing to do.
Thank you very much for the clarifications on that one. Councillor Van Sweden.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I do have concerns about this. I know from looking at the photograph aerially that this is housing that's set amongst a forest, essentially. And as they start to expand the housing with an extension, obviously, that has taken away from their green space. And they've then bought this land and expanded their green space. But then what will then come after that? Will there then be another expansion of the building into that green space and then another expansion of the green space to accommodate that larger building? So I'm concerned about that domino effect of allowing building more green spaces, adding into a personal garden. Yeah, that's what concerns me with this, that would continue to occur.
I guess on that point, Councillor Van Sweden, if there was to be any further or any potential for that to happen, the applicant would need to come back and make further applications to the planning committee, of which we would need to deal with it at that point. But I do note the comments that you've made there. Councillor Blake.
Yes, convener. I have a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Van Sweden just said as well. And my concern, so if we then we look at this, then the neighbouring house, so I guess there's the question, the boundaries then become irregular because the neighbouring house's boundary is much smaller. I don't know if there's ownership of the land on the other side of the group, but I do wonder whether then you've got the neighbouring house, the joint house, will then say, well, think to themselves, well, I could be expanding my garden too, and then you get a loss there as well. That's so I guess one of my thoughts was around the irregularity of boundaries and the impact that might have on the fragmentation of and the loss of the green space, that's of the open space, the amenity land. So yeah, so that's probably one of my concerns, is that how then we get that irregular boundary.
I guess one point to make is through the applicant submissions in regard to the land that they are looking to extend into is becoming a little bit of it's not forest land, it's just looks like a mound of earth that's been greened, and the applicant through some of the submissions has noticed that has become a little bit of a ground for just dumping stuff into. So if the applicant wants to take over this land of which they own, although that's not a material plan consideration that they own that land, if they are to sort of boundary or extend that boundary area into that, it will be better landscaped in that relation to what it's currently sitting as. It's not, I wouldn't say it's encroaching near any other properties or gardens in that regard either. So my consideration with regards to the fragmenting of space and the lines of the fence as a mitigating factor within what could potentially the land could become in terms of landscaping, and no longer just a grassed area where things are just left, I think outweighs. But I'm happy for folk to come back in again on that one. Councillor Van Sweden.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, from the aerial view, that this is a house built in a forest. So the house is surrounded by a forest, and the house is now encroaching into the forest and taking some of the forest, including the trees, into their garden. And I see that the owners perceive that they will increase the biodiversity by gardening, but this is not the same as the biodiversity in a forest. And yeah, I worry about this steady slopage into, buying land, then, having a garden, then there could be another extension, and then, then we've got another house. So, this is a house that's in a forest, and there's no one dumping anything in their back garden. Their back garden is the forest, as far as I can see from the aerial view. That's my feeling about it.
Okay. Anyone else wish to come in on this one? Anything from yourself, Councillor Clark?
I was just thinking there, I was correct in thinking the damaged trees that were damaged in the storm that nobody's dealt with up till now, they are going to be removed. Was that correct?
Agreed.
Yeah, I understand any storm damage has already been removed. I think that was one of the things that was potentially highlighted. Yeah.
Just seems to be a fair bit there. It's rotten, dead wood. That's my only thing that I was going to speak on. It doesn't look, there's no houses looking right onto it. There's no paths around that way. Where there is paths is not near this gardened area at all. Sorry, that's just my opinion.
Thank you very much. I do note as well in the submissions that there has been no objections from the neighbour as well, in terms of the point Councillor Blake raised there in terms of the size of the garden as well, and knowing how accurate. The community council is out there and the forthcoming that of any concerns that they normally have in relation to planning applications. There has been no comments received from them as well, so I am content with that. Anyone else wish to come back in? So at the moment, I am minded to overturn the officer's recommendations and approve this application. Is anyone else otherwise minded? Councillor Van Sweden?
Yeah, I would be supporting the officer's recommendations.
Okay, okay. So we'll quickly go around the room. So Councillor Van Sweden is for officers. Is okay. Councillor Blake?
I would also be minded to support the officer's recommendations here.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Copeland?
I'm with you, convener. I'd be overturning the officers and granting the permission.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Clark?
Likewise, I'd be overturning the decision and granting it.
Thank you very much. So by means of 3 votes to 2, as a local review body has therefore agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer by majority. We need to consider any further conditions that may be attached to the approval of the application. Ms. Green, is there anything you wish to bring back in regarding conditions on this one?
No, I don't think there's anything. I mean, the report does talk about the possibility of various conditions to prevent, permitted development rights, but you would be splitting this area off from what they could do in their own garden, so it's probably not reasonable to do that. So I wouldn't have any conditions to recommend.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Members, that brings us to the end of today's LRB. Thank you very much for everyone's attendance today. And just as a note, that all outcomes of all the applications will be submitted to the agents or applicants in the forthcoming days. Thank you very much, members, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.